Hello, everyone. We're just going to give it a couple minutes as people log on here. So some folks are still logging on. We'll just give it maybe 20 more seconds, and then we'll get going.
Sounds good.
Okay. Thank you, everyone, for joining our webinar today. I am joined by a great panel. My name is Farah Ahmad, and I am the Chief Commercial Officer at Strategicon Pharma, who's the developer of Clinical Maestro. And today we're very eager to speak to you about clinical outsourcing processes and the butterfly effect. So really the idea is how a small change can create a ripple effect through an organization and deliver value. And in practice, what are some of the best ways to actually support your team and your organization to get through change and manage new technologies coming in. So I'm going to quickly just introduce my esteemed panel here. We're going to go ahead and start at the top of your screen with Wayne Bowden. Wayne, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Wayne Bowden here. I'm the Vice President of Partnerships and Strategy at BioRaci. BioRaci is a full-service global CRO. My background is in academic preclinical research, actually first at Baylor College of Medicine, then at FIU. Joined BioRaci about 10 years ago, and there I've been really had my hands on all aspects of the business, from operations through business development and even marketing. And in that time have overseen and participated in a lot of the technological advancements and some of the technological failures as well as along the way. So I'm looking forward to speaking about that.
Great, thank you. And we'll go to Derek Wade. Please introduce yourself.
Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Derek Wade. I've been in clinical operations for over 35 years with various pharmaceutical, biotech, and medical device companies. I've actually held full-time positions with each of those companies, with increasing responsibility in each until I reached the level of vice president. I'm currently an executive clinical operations consultant, providing senior level expertise, building, optimizing, and directing clinical operations departments for small and mid-sized biotech. Nice to meet everyone.
Thank you. Hansu.
Sure. Hansu Dong, and I am the Senior Director and Head of Clinical Outsourcing and Business Operations for Novavax. Before this, I was the Head of Technology Alliances at AstraZeneca and have worked, in this space in alliance management and outsourcing since about 2002. So, worked across multiple different types of companies, biotech, mid-sized pharma, big pharma, doing everything from preclinical through post-marketed studies.
Great, thank you, Hansu. Zaid?
Hi, everybody. This is Zaid Barakat from Cambridge, Mass. I am a managing director with a team called Scimitar. We're a management consulting firm that focuses on biopharmaceutical clients, typically making major organizational and operating model changes, and increasingly that means digital strategies and digital solutions. And my own background as well is primarily focused in the clinical operations space and clinical development. Do have, cross the value chain expertise as well. And along the way had co-founded a couple of successful companies as well. One biotech company called Oro Biosciences, which is going strong, and a hedge fund, which was an interesting experience for another time. Great to meet you all.
Great. And we also have Rainey Stevens.
Hey everybody, Rainey Stevens here. I'm a outsourcing and contract negotiation and vendor relationship management consultant. I'm currently supporting a couple of biopharma companies, including Intellia Therapeutics. I think, Farah, that's who you noted as far as my representation today, helping them with their clinical development, sourcing, and vendor relationship management needs. I've been around as well a number of years, a couple of decades plus, at SMOs, CROs, as well as large and mid-size and now small biopharma companies. Formerly global head of outsourcing and contracting at Astellas in Chicago, and spent a number of years at Pfizer doing investigator contract management, as well as helping lead one of the business units in an outsourcing role. So glad to be here, and hopefully we'll have a good time.
I'm sure we will. Thank you, Rainey. And then finally, we have Radhika.
Hi there, everyone. This is Radhika Subramkrishna, and I'm really very happy to be here on this panel discussion. I have 25 years of experience in the field, having served on, I'd like to think, all four sides of the business. I've been on the CRO side, on multiple different responsibilities, overseeing different portfolios of biotech clients. On the sponsor side, I've held many different roles, head of outsourcing, head of clinical operations, process excellence, project management. I've also been on the site side at two different institutions, UCSF and Cleveland Clinic. And now finally here I am at Strategicon, which is a service technology provider. So I'm happy to very excited to be part of this discussion today.
Great, thank you so much. So just a few housekeeping items before we kind of jump in. We are going to do kind of a Q&A structure here, and we are going to allow for some questions at the end. And rest assured that you will receive a recording as well as the slides if you so wish. And so no need to take too many notes. We will make those available to you. We're also going to do a couple of polls. So let's go ahead and pull up the first poll. Okay, so we're going to start with this one. Really love to know from the audience's perspective, how did the pandemic change clinical outsourcing practices? So you can select one of the following choices. So did you experience an increase in volume and intensity? Did you experience a decrease in volume and intensity? Did you find that there was a greater reliance on your CRO partners for expertise and budgets? Was there perhaps nothing that changed and kind of fully status quo through the pandemic? And also, did you find yourself kind of sourcing more technology solutions? So let's go ahead and put in those responses, please. And Elsie, you let me know when we're going to close that up.
You need some music there, Farah, for these.
Maybe
Wayne can play the guitar for us.
Grab one of these guitars and play us in.
I'm
gonna say,
I think
if
this
somebody
should be one of those pick more than one.
Yeah.
I think, yeah, this one, I guess we're forcing an answer, but let's go ahead and wrap it up. Elsie, can we share the results? All right, interesting. So we do have a few status quos, and we did see that a lot of technology solutions are being sourced, as well as really a reliance on the CRO partners. So those are kind of the top two responses. Definitely provide some great insights. Thank you so much. Okay, we do have the second poll. I want to keep the audience here warmed up and on their feet. So let's pull up poll number 2. So for this one, we really want to understand from your perspective in looking at technology solutions, what would be your wish list? What would be the items that you would want to include there? So let's pull up poll number 2. What clinical outsourcing pain points would you like technology to solve? So again, here we're kind of forcing one answer. I'm sure that we would want to check these all off, but really love to understand from the audience's perspective, where is the greatest pain? So the first one is around kind of collaborative study design and scenario planning. Are you looking for more pricing transparency? Are you looking for a way to plan for succession and centralization of knowledge? Are you looking for more, easier, less painful apple-to-apple budget comparisons? And are you looking for a better way to manage communication with your vendors? Let's go ahead and let that one come in for a few seconds. Okay, Elsie, I think that's enough time. Let's pull up the response. Great. Oh, interesting. So definitely pricing transparency, apple to apple is a big challenge, definitely, and vendor communication. So that's great. Thank you so much. Okay, so we're going to delve right in here, and we do have kind of three themes for today's discussion. So you'll see those kind of appear on the top right of your slides. Firstly, we're going to talk about kind of the pain points. So, understanding that there is maybe a problem in the industry in this area of clinical business operations, which we define as the planning of trials, the comparison of scenarios, the outsourcing process, and then later on some of the clinical finance processes. So, is there this moment where you decide that you want to act and move into assessing solutions, looking for solutions, understanding really what your priority needs are, and going through that process to align your stakeholders and adequately vet providers. And then finally, I think where we're going to spend the most of our time here today is on the third chevron here around the movement to action. So how do you, once you have that solution identified, how do you drive change successfully in your organization, understanding that most clinical operations entities are quite conservative? What are some of the best practices that can assure you to actually adopt that technology and gain value out of it through maybe communication, commitment, culture? So this is really where we're going to try to focus a lot of the discussion today. So we're going to start with the first question. We're going to look at kind of the state of the industry. So we have seen that the area of clinical business operations represents about 10% of trial costs, over the life of the trial in terms of, doing the outsourcing, managing the budget, managing all the changes that could take place, the change orders, etc. But yet it has received only 3% of industry technology investment in the last 10 years. And if you contrast that with kind of more clinical solutions and technologies, there's a vast difference in terms of the solutions that have been brought to the market in that period of 10 years. So my first question for the panelists is really, as outsourcing professionals, why do you think that is? Why is it that we have really not paid attention to this vertical for so long? And for those of you that have implemented disruptive technologies recently in your organization, what were some of the challenges to implementing those? So we're going to start here with, actually, we're going to kind of position this interestingly with kind of the sponsor view, the CRO view, and the technology provider view. So let's go ahead and start with Hansu. If you're ready, Hansu, to give your thoughts.
Sure. So I'm probably gonna sound a little cynical here, but I think a lot of those business operations costs, the clinical business operations costs, are in the CRO, right, where they have to develop the proposal, the budget, and those are completely non-billable. So I just don't see. I think it's going to be hard to drive a change there where, a lot of those costs are really just going to be non-billable, and, who's going to, it's it's just gonna be something where, you know, there's not gonna be too much of a desire to invest in something like that, I think, at least on the CRO side. On the sponsor side, you know, I definitely have a need for it in my current company, right? You know, we are working with Clinical Maestro, so, you know, full transparency. You know, I had a need to come up with, you know, quickly, you know, developing different scenarios, budgets for those scenarios, things like that, because, you know, we can't wait, you know, 2 to 4 weeks for the CRO to come up with a budget for us. So, you know, I think there's definitely more of a need on the sponsor side than I think on the CRO side, but that's, you know, that's my opinion. When I worked at a bigger pharma company, I think it was less of a need. We didn't have as much of a need for the scenario planning. You know, we had, you know, we had set rates with the CROs, and it was sort of plug and play in terms of, you know, how we just came up with the budget.
Right. That's interesting. So really, you're looking to the speed and agility that it provides. And I'll kind of hand it over to Rainey before we go to Wayne, and I'll kind of add some comments to what you said, Hansu. Certainly, with my background on the CRO side, Rainey, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. I think there are a couple of things. One is there's only so much internal budget that gets spread around, and you know, from within a biopharma company, and the business operations function, especially the outsourcing function, in my experience historically, has been the lowest on the priority list essentially. At one company I was with, I kind of likened it to my outsourcing team being like mushrooms in a dark closet. You know, nobody pays attention to you until they're ready to pick you, right? And you don't get a lot of funding. There aren't a lot of advocates for the outsourcing function that would drive more of that budget share in. That changes though as you develop relationships internally and you strengthen the value that you provide as an outsourcing department with your clinical operations colleagues, especially because they can be really good, strong advocates that help you get more budget, that gives you a bit more room to explore solutions. And then I think that's the other side of the problem is that there haven't been, up until honestly recently. In fact, I was looking at a presentation I gave not too long ago, a year and a half ago, at a conference where I was talking about the lack of really solid solutions in the industry to help give you a decent benchmarking and cost analysis platform that you could then, integrate data into and look across. And I know, the same as Hansu, I am using Maestro and have really liked it. It has definitely increased the speed at which we're able to cross compare when we get bids in. But that hasn't been around, you guys haven't been around that long relatively. There have been a couple of other solutions out there, but not ones that really span the breadth of what we really need in this function. So it's been a very manual process, and it's relied on internal data and Excel essentially to try to parse out information from bids, and then you pull that together and you try to then share it for consumption with your customers internally. That's a really challenging process to manage. And when you don't have a lot of money in your budget, then you spend it mostly on resources who are going to do that manual work, not on technology that's going to enable you to do more of that work with fewer or the same number of people. So I think that's a couple of the biggest things. And I could talk some more about challenges, but I know we want to keep it moving, so I'll pass the baton, so to speak.
Yeah, great points, Rainey. Thank you. And I think just to, react to some of the comments that Hansu made around the cost being in the CRO and non-billable. I've lived that for many years, kind of 15 years on the CRO side, and felt that was always a very difficult process to manage, very costly, very hard to kind of retain the talent, a lot of volume, not a lot of return. And if you think about, what you're investing, So it might be even more of a reason to kind of to invest in technology on the CRO side. But I'd love to kind of hear Wayne's perspective on that.
Yeah, I think there's definitely some of that. It is a quote unquote non-billable activity to sort of figure out how we're going to, the pricing strategy and the overall strategic planning for the study. And most of the, the numbers don't surprise me, because most of the innovation and the things that are truly disruptive are going to be happening on the, on the actual execution side, on technologies that as a CRO, we want to implement for our sponsors, to really add value. So it's kind of hard, it's hard to make the case that this adds a lot of value, but it really does add a lot of value. So, but it's more of an iterative process. It's not as sexy, as some of like the really disruptive technologies that probably received a lot of investment. For example, last year during the pandemic, when everybody was going, remote and implementing all these digital technologies. But at the same time, we made the case, I made the case in my company at that time during coronavirus pandemic that, we really need a way to assess, our pricing versus the market, make sure that we're adding value for our clients, but at the same time, retaining our margins. And so that's on the non-billable side. It's maybe not so sexy, but it's very important to focus on. But then, one other thing that I'm involved with, obviously at BioRacy, in the partnerships and strategy piece, is we're also looking outwardly at other CRO partners, other vendors, that we utilize on studies. And those activities very often are billable. I mean, if we have to go and find, how to execute, and identify a central lab, or identify, a depot, or identify some other partner in a distant land. For example, we're doing a study now in Mongolia, right, where nobody has ever, I think there's maybe one other study that's ever been ran there. So the sponsor is paying us to do that, because it's not reasonable that we would have operations set up in Mongolia. So when we go and do something like that, it really does help to also have a process and a platform by which we can look at the clinical business operations and, in a streamlined way. So, and those pieces are billable. So, I think it can go both ways, but I think the point really is that these numbers, don't surprise us, because it is something that often gets overlooked when you have a lot of these other disruptive technologies that are kind of going on in the background.
Excellent. Thank you, Wayne. And Radhika, I guess you'll get the last word on this one.
Sure. Yeah, no, thank you. And actually, all the other panelists have brought up really good points, so and I'm looking at it from all sides of the business. When I was so I agree totally with Wayne's comments as well as Hansu's in terms of how the CRO might look at this. And when I think about it, the other point related to the CRO side is also that at the time, for example, when I was at Covance several years ago, we didn't have technology like this, or and the algorithm, the CRO wants to have their own algorithms. They want to put in different things. You didn't have a tool to be able to do that, so it was easier to do all of that in Excel. And to, of course, Rainey's points on the sponsor and the CRO side, usually somehow the clinical work is considered the most important, and all the other work is like necessary evil that has to be done, but it's not really given the the weight that it should, because all of these things can add up. And I've also been on the sponsor side where we've spent so much time staring at different Excel sheets coming back, like all of the different bids. So and also to Rainey's point, I think we didn't have technology right previously, so it was just easier to do it in Excel. But now that we have a tool like Clinical Maestro, etc., I mean, I think there is more of an opportunity to actually support these needs, and also I think there's also potentially, the point that you made, Farah, that 10% of the cost of is coming from clinical business operation, but only 3% is funded. I don't know how well known that fact is, and maybe if more people were aware, I think till now there wasn't a way to also quantify how much time we're spending. We keep doing the work. When I was on the sponsor side, we would just do whatever was necessary to get it done. Same thing on the CRO side, but nobody sat down to quantify, okay, how long does it really take? How much effort are we spending? So I think now that there is more awareness of that, then people will hopefully be more amenable to getting technology to help us with this.
Can I add on to that, Farah, real quick?
Sure, yeah.
Because Radhika, that's a great point. And I think in a small company starting out where you don't have anything that has to change, it's much easier, I have seen and found, to present the value case of speed. And I think one of the biggest things that I've gotten out of Maestro personally is that speed from RFP to decision is so much shorter. The system actually pays for itself. It's much harder if you've got an established, well-worn path of Excel and a manual process to change that, and that's a big challenge. It's not insurmountable, but you have to be able to present the value case to your management in order to get the funding you need to actually prove that what you're saying will actually come true. And it does work. It's nothing's perfect, right? There's always still going to be something you got to work through. But I think as your product and others that come out, I'm sure in the future, that will only help keep that space within our segment and in our sector more robust, right? It'll keep you guys honest. You'll have to improve your product as other competition shows up. And then other users like me will have exposure to multiple platforms, and that'll eventually trickle its way into our customers internally on the sponsor side who get it and who see it. And once they do, they don't want to go back. I got clin ops professionals, the operators that the last thing they want is to get another email with 16 attachments from a proposal. They would much rather look in one space to get that information now, but they've got to try it and then they buy it. So I just want to throw that in.
Great points. So we're going to move along. Thank you so much for that. Kind of a good segue into our next question here, which is to do more with looking at those solutions. So we have seen some hesitancy on technology, and part of that is really the volume of choices that you have today in various different areas that affect clinical operations. So kind of where do we focus, and how do we decide when to bring in a technology? So we do see that ClinOps and outsourcing professionals are really inundated with a lot of vendor outreach. We know that's a fact. I actually was reading a report from Microsoft that stated that during the pandemic, the volume of emails went up by 40 billion globally. So it's quite shocking. But the point we're trying to make here is that there is a multitude of technology platforms offering to transform inefficient processes into digital. And that's a great thing for the industry, because we do need to kind of modernize and advance. But the question is actually, how do you focus? Why did you decide to focus on budgeting and outsourcing? And what were some of the key considerations that you had to effectively vet your technology providers? So let's go ahead and start here with Zaid.
Yeah, so very good questions, and very topical, obviously, with what Rainey was just describing and Radhika was elaborating on as well. But I think in general, to your point that you were making, Farah, that the number of solutions are clearly very daunting. And I think there's the fact that business operations, this is an embedded capability. So if there's any existing systems, or if there's any reason not to shift, say even some simple Excel solution, I think it's swimming against the current. And I think Rainey was spot on too in pointing out that often smaller companies, or at least those that have kind of the fingerprint of companies that are more agile, risk-taking, are willing to try and very rapidly try, iterate, fail on new technologies. You'll see them having more interest in trying such solutions. Within budgeting and outsourcing, there is a really good value case there. It's just a very difficult kind of hurdle that you have to get over. And that is like gathering the data, doing so in a robust way, organizing the data. In some cases, internal biopharmaceutical companies, even CROs, may not have the data organized in such a way that makes the analytics easy. So, that being said, though, the case has definitely gotten much more powerful, and certainly we've noticed the appetite to try new solutions and get visibility into some of these challenges has become much higher in the case of the pandemic, and largely driven, I think, by the fact that, as you guys pointed out, there's robust solutions now that are cloud-based, that importantly are user-friendly, that don't require a lot of pain. I think we're all aware that there are existing solutions out there, but in some cases it requires one organizational SME expert who knows how to use the system. And if anyone else tries to put in data, it gives you a completely different answer. I think there's definitely been more tolerance and a lot more kind of appetite as the tools have become much more capable and can do what they're kind of can drive to that future state, drive to that vision and value that people need.
Great. Thank you so much for that. I think very good points on the operator, the importance of the operator and the consistency and the capability of that individual. I'd love to hear from Derek as a professional that has been both in leadership on the ClinOps side and on the IT side. Derek, what are some of your thoughts in terms of focusing on budgeting and outsourcing technology, and also considerations to effectively vet any technology provider?
Thanks, Farah. So, just in my experience on both sides, when I was on the clinical ops side, was really coming up with a strong business specification. What actually did we need to solve, and to really come up with that, so that once we locked in on that spec, then we can then go out and look at what vendors might actually have what short list of vendors we could actually bring in to start, vetting against that specification. And when we got down into some of the actual parameters that we were looking at, if we didn't have, when I worked at larger companies where we had technologies, we were looking at would it integrate with what we had? Did we need to scrap that and to start all over? Did we have to build APIs, across the different applications? Basically system compatibility. And then the smaller companies, as Radhika and Rennie were talking to, is that, if we were doing it by Excel and kind of, just manual processes, nobody really took a look at what was the cost or the time to do that. So we then also had to say, okay, well, we had, now there's going to be a cost to that, to implement a new system. And people looked at that while they weren't really realizing that there was already a cost to working within those Excel spreadsheets and using all these resources to really kind of force these things through. So it was really to, bring, to make that proposition to upper management, to senior management, to say, here are the things that we need to focus on. Here's the value that these systems will bring. And then another parameter that we looked at was, what did the vendors that we were vetting bring? How would they support the organization? What type of training programs, continuous training programs were there? And those were some of the things that we really looked at to make sure that they were on a short list of of those companies that we brought in to actually to show us what they had and really match up against that business spec.
That's a great point, Derek, and a great segue to maybe hear again from Rainey and then Radhika, the whole concept of the support and service model to ensure the technology adoption will be successful in the organization. So maybe I'll kind of quickly jump to Rainey to provide some thoughts on that.
Well, there's a couple of things, and I think, Derek, you hit a good point. The cost of what we do within this function it's not on the surface, right? It's buried in your people cost. And getting buy-in to show that there's value is a tricky, it's a tricky path to take because you do need support. You need your IT group, you need your finance group, You need your ClinOps colleagues to all support what is shifting or what's changing. And being able to shed some light on what the value really is, I think, is a key driver in this that helps you, one, establish that the technology is worth it, right? It's not necessarily a trade-off. I've had conversations in the past where it's like, oh, you want to spend 100 grand on this technology. Well, what are you going to give me in exchange? And I'm like, well, I'm going to give you much more leverage and power over my time to give you value in the kinds of providers you're selecting and that you're choosing from. It's not any value to an organization for me to have to take 3 different Excel spreadsheets and normalize activities and then blend the rates together and figure out how to, create my own algorithms or sum tables that show, hey, boom, here's your cost. That's ridiculous in this day and age. And it's, we're getting to a point where, if you're able to, as an outsourcing professional, especially, understand what's going on within the providers that you're looking at and look beyond that, just the data flow, that's your real value. So I think, that support network is really needed, but you've got, it's incumbent upon us in this function to go back inside and strengthen and build the bridges and relationships that make the buying decision and the change decision easier, because it's that resistance to change, that is the biggest hurdle, I think, to making a change like this. You'd mentioned, I think, in the polled results, Farah, from the beginning, I'd sit in, I moderate well, it was quarterly, now it's every 6 weeks, and on Zoom, linking leaders, the outsourcing roundtable. And, all the peers that we have, Hansu and I are in this a lot together, we've been talking about the influx of technology applications and solutions since the beginning of the pandemic. Almost every single meeting we talk about this because there are so many. They don't all have a long-term value proposition, but what is encouraging is that more and more companies are looking beyond the end of the pandemic and getting back to normal, whatever that means, to keeping those technology applications and solutions in play. And I think that's a really good thing for us in our function as we go forward.
Excellent.
I don't know
points.
if I answered the question, but there you go.
Yeah, you definitely did. Again, I'm going to give last word on this to Radhika.
Yeah, no, I think everybody, Derek and Renee, etc., have made some very good points, so I do agree. I think the big thing from, first of all, when you're looking at technology, I mean, again, pre-pandemic, post, I've seen a big difference, right? There's less, actually, I feel like there's more acceptance of technology, almost because people were pushed into it. But again, the type of technology that they were more accepting of is things like, say, remote health visits or, things like that, which are again coming into the clinical realm. Again, it comes back to a point made, I think, previously, that those are supposedly billable, so it's easier to approve technology there. This is more like kind of proving the point that, the business operations is like a hidden necessary thing, but people haven't quantified. So to Renee's point, and to Derek's, if we took the trouble to actually do that, then I think there would be more acceptance. But again, it comes with appropriate change management, because it's always difficult to shift people from what they are doing. But I think also from the technology provider's perspective, it's also important, the kind of service model, because knowing and anticipating that people are going to be afraid of accepting new technology, I think it's really incumbent upon the service provider, or the technology provider rather, to offer more support and offer continuous support. It's not sufficient. I mean, having been, on the technology provider side for a couple of years, I can say it's not sufficient to just say, okay, give the 1 day training or 2 hours training and then walk away, right? Because I think accepting technology is also a process. It's not a point in time. So I think you need, the technology provider has to be patient and accept that it will be a journey that they make along with the, the client, so that it's a successful adoption of the technology.
Great, absolutely. I like that metaphor of the journey. Kind of takes us to our next topic here, where we're now moving to the theme of action. So we do see that there is kind of a perceived burden of changing, and it is a burden in some way, because you are going above your kind of your day job. This J curve demonstrates how you do have a period of disruption between kind of the current state and the desired state. And actually, I was enlightened and taught about this curve by Derek. So I think I would love to kind of hand it over to him. And of course, any buyer of technology is going to want to limit the amount of dip that they see there, and how fast they can get from the current state to the desired state, knowing that, to Radhika's point, it's not going to be instantaneous, but you are going to end up in a better place. So I'm going to hand it to Derek to provide some comments on this on this journey.
Thanks, Farah. So yeah, when in past opportunities, when I was with different biotechs, one of the things that we knew that this was actually going to happen, and one of the major ways that we actually overcame this was to really, number one, form a team of all the different stakeholders, and then also to walk them through what the process, what's going to happen in the process. We found that when I did it, the first time I implemented, I didn't have that experience to know that this was going to happen, and it was a bit more dicey. Following that, I actually had the experience to be able to tell them that what was going to happen, what was going to be the future state, and everything that we would go through until we got to that desired state. And communicating with the team and the clinical operations department in particular, early and often, was really, we were able to mitigate some of the challenges that we had when we hit that dip. Sometimes that dip is called the search for the guilty, because at that point they're like, who thought this was a good idea? So the whole thing is that, we found that if we could really persevere through that dip as we move from the current state of what we were doing to where we wanted to get to, we would obviously come out higher at the end. But really, to communicate early and often. There were things that we definitely had to change, and not only the technology, but what were the processes that we had to change, and to get those written and implemented along with the technology. Really to overcome the way we overcame some of the resistance to change when we were in that well, in that dip, was to really show them what was in it for them. Everybody needs a whiffum. What's in it for you? So we actually made that very clear as well. And then the other points that Radhika and Renee and the other panelists were making is that there would be support going forward. When they felt like, if they felt like they were moving from something that they knew to something that was new and they weren't really quite sure how to proceed, if they felt like they weren't being supported, it was a much more difficult process to move from the current state to get that technology implemented and working within the department. So it was all about communication and really sharing with them what's in it for them at the end of the line.
Great points, Derek. Thank you for that. I'm actually going to turn it over to Zaid at this point. Zaid, in your role, you're probably working with a lot of companies that are going through this. So how do you talk them through it, and what are the most important considerations to get to that desired state as quickly as possible?
Yeah, I really loved how Derek framed it. I never heard of whiffum before, but that's a really cool expression. It's very true. I think you can't underestimate the importance of continuous communication, mapping out what the user experience will look like. And the most important thing, I think, though, is articulate, here's what that future state will look like. Here's what the benefit should be. and then having the
Mhm.
purity of that vision and continuously painting that vision. Here's how it should make life easier, revisiting it very frequently to make sure that that true north is going to be met. Because at any point, if that gets compromised, if that vision is somehow kind of not intact, the whole journey starts to fall apart. There are all sorts of challenges along the way, with having implementation fatigue, the amount of cumbersome specifications and user experience incorporation, iterating. So, the painting that picture, reminding people of the future state value is really critical. And I really think the good news is too, there are very few initiatives that we've rolled out where the endpoint, the value doesn't actually exceed what the initial value is that you sort of established, because other functions start to become aware of the successful implementation and start thinking, hey, maybe I could use this capability, or we could have this bolt-on feature. We just recently set up a set of like integrated dashboards for program visibility, where users could go down and drill down with 100% like visibility, what the status is, look at KPIs. And that started to gain traction across multiple functions. It started to get used from a portfolio-wide context. We never envisioned that happening, but in many cases, if you do persist, kind of maintaining that purity of intent, the clear vision of the future state, the good news is the outcome is sometimes higher than what you might anticipate.
Excellent.
So stick with it.
Maybe I could
Very
tack on
interesting.
two quick
Yeah.
comments on that too.
Sure.
One of the, because what Zaid and Derek have said is absolutely correct. And communication is such a big piece of it. Just wanted to add that the communication really also works both ways, because one of the issues that we had in my organization with trying to do some technological changes early on in my tenure at the company, well, two issues. Number one, I think we tried to change too much in too short of a time. So I think you have to understand that any organization can only take so much change. But the second big issue was basically that, like, when we were seeking that feedback, trying to measure how much the users were actually using the system, we found that users have a very low pain threshold. If they hit issues early on, they'll stop using it very quickly and they'll go back to their old methods. So we had to track, we had to measure, and if we ever found that there was a dip in use, we had to really extract that feedback out of them and say, what is wrong with the system? What's going on? Please tell us, what the issue is. And this is also, I think, where some of the points that were made previously about the importance of having the technology provider training, things like that available. But it's getting also that feedback back from the users to have the implementation team and the user team really tied at the hip, so that you can solve these issues on the fly. Because the users won't continue using the system if they aren't getting their needs met very quickly.
Those are great points that you added, Wayne. Certainly, I've read a lot about kind of engaging and empowering the users in the implementation process as another tactic for success. So I think you touched well on that. Just in the interest of time, we're going to skip along here, and the next question is again around that burden of implementation. Kind of, the fact that as we saw, and as Zaid actually mentioned with facts from his experience doing this and supporting many of Scimitar's clients implementing digital technologies, yes, it is an added task over your day job, but that end state is worth the extra work. Oftentimes it's even higher than what you anticipate. So really the question is, to learn more about your journey implementing disruptive technology, and what were some of the biggest challenges you experienced and how you overcame that. And I'm going to go to Hansu for this one.
Sure. So actually, when I was at AstraZeneca, we were implementing a new technology for negotiating site contracts, right? We were trying to automate it as much as possible. And it was a burden, right? But it goes back to a lot of what Derek and Zaid were talking about, and it was changing the culture, right? There was an immediate resistance to trying to do this in a different way, because it had always been done, one way, right? We always outsource it to the CRO. Therefore, why would we have to change things? So what we ended up doing was, it was over communication. We did road shows. We were cheerleaders for this new technology that we wanted to implement. We met with all the stakeholders. We got their input into how we wanted this system to be designed. We had internal experts, who were, who would basically be the administrators for this system, right? And they were the ones that people would go to if there were issues. Like I said, it's a lot of what we had already talked about, but that's the type of stuff we were doing to get this implemented, and we got it done. So we changed how we were doing site contracting within AstraZeneca, at least within the US.
Interesting. Great. I'm going to skip along. We are kind of getting to the end of the time, and we wanted to allow for a couple more minutes at the end. So I'm going to ask for the next poll to be brought up at this time. Great. So from all that you've heard today so far, what do you believe some of the key success factors are for implementing new technology and driving positive change? Again, these are all, I think, very valuable points here and valid selections, but we're going to kind of force you to pick one here. Probably the real answer is all of these, but I'd love to hear from the audience at this time. Okay, Elsie, can we pull that up? Wow, yeah, great to see this. I think the alignment engagement with management and stakeholders, including the users, is highly pertinent, and the support and the training. Thank you so much for participating in that poll. So we're going to go to the next slide. So just quickly, I won't spend too much time on this, but it kind of iterates those prior chevrons that we showed. So kind of that first stage is to unfreeze, to kind of determine what needs to change and ensure that you are putting in the support from management and other stakeholders and driving that change need, much like what Hansu mentioned. Then you are shifting to kind of a moment of change, where, to Derek and Wayne's point, you need to kind of communicate very often. You need to empower people and involve people in that process. And then finally, which is also very important, to really freeze back that new method to avoid reverting to the old methods and sustain that value of change. So our last slide here is talking about kind of this cost of inaction. I think Rainey had alluded to that in his comments, where you do, there is a cost of not changing. So oftentimes the impetus is when the pain of remaining the same actually exceeds the pain of changing. So I thought that was an interesting approach. So how would we quantify pain? So there's many ways. Cost reduction, for example, looking at consolidating systems, avoiding overruns, gaining efficiency, avoiding certain costs. So errors and surprises, working in silos. Of course, those are areas, if you think of change orders that are unexpected, those could be avoided with greater visibility. The cost of quality. So what is the cost of inconsistencies in your reporting and actually potentially making the wrong decision because you are lacking some key data? The slower pace. So Rainey mentioned a few times, the speed that's possible through technology. May be hard to quantify, but there is a way if you think about the time and the number of FTEs participating in the process. Opportunity loss. What other productivity could you apply your staff on if they were not, massaging Excel tables to match up? And then finally, delays to market. Can you actually get to the market faster are you missing out on revenue by being slower? And I guess there's one more here, the cost of the frustration. So that's probably also hard to quantify, but just, retention of talent. We have millennials as the biggest component of the workforce in the US today. So that certainly has a cost as well. So of course, the question here, this is our final question, is what were some of the challenges of building the case for change at your organization? How are you able to enact that change? And what do you think the cost would have been to delay improving things? So maybe I'll start with Rainey on this one.
Yeah, I think even the previous discussion that was going on about communication, Farah, and that middle chevron with change, that's probably, in my experience, personally, that was the biggest challenge. You get so busy with what is going on, not only in the day job, but also in whatever you're trying to move forward as an initiative or a change management case, that it's easy to forget to follow up with people who you initially reached out to. They're on board, everybody's happy, yeah, go for it, and you start going down this path. If you don't follow back up and keep that communication fresh, that can really derail you, and the cost of that delay is really in the implementation phase of what you're doing. There are the last one you had about the frustration change, I thought was really cool, because I've seen so many people burn out because they just get so tired of doing the same old thing, right? And really, the value that we bring to clinical trials and the progress towards getting new medicines to market is not for us, not in data analysis as much as it is in understanding the critical path and how we can enable it and help our colleagues get their projects done more quickly and with higher quality and speed. So those costs are really true. And you don't see that frustration change until it's too late, right? And then people are either gone, they move on to new jobs, or they leave your organization or whatever. So if you can help avoid that, that's really a good thing to try. But that communication loop, critical.
Excellent. Fully agree. Certainly, then you have all those turnover challenges and the knowledge transfer challenges. So we just have a couple minutes. We are going to run about 5 minutes over just to allow for some time for questions, but I'm going to kind of open it up to the panel. Anyone else like to jump in at this point?
Maybe I'll just say one quick thing that, it's very easy to I think, identify reasons not to embrace the change. It's almost like you don't know what the opportunity is since you haven't experienced it yet. So it's almost like, one of the frog in the boiling water type phenomenon, that, and it happens a lot more, I think, in larger firms, not to stereotype, but, I think as individuals, be it in procurement or functional heads, I think it's incumbent to try and break that cycle. And try and build the case. Otherwise, you fall into the trap of stagnation, and it can drive obviously quite a bit of value, unrecognized value, and knowing what you're optimizing for. It's not just the cost, but the speed, quality, are key, as Rainey was saying. But it's also in most cases where people come out on the other side, it's a great opportunity for personal development, having led some of these initiatives. So often they can be perceived quite well. So I would just make a plug to take the leap,
Great. Thank you so much. We are getting to the end of the time. So we are going to just turn it over for questions. We'll run a few minutes longer. We do have one question that has come in here, and we would like the panel to comment on managing strategic CRO relationships in a non-competitive setting that is typical of larger companies. If everything is agreed in advance, Hansu, probably this was in response to your comment, such as kind of rates and resources, is the management of the agreements easier? And I guess the transparency, is it more transparent from your perspective?
So I guess I'll try and take that. Nothing's ever easier. It has its own complexities. So you have to build the foundation for that, right? we had to build all of these. We had to build the governance model up first. Then we built up the vendor management plan for the different CRO partners. You have to build up all of the different subcommittees, within the governance. I think one thing that comes to mind actually is the last poll. I think there were no votes for culture, and I had mentioned this during our dry run.
Yeah.
There's a quote that culture eats strategy for breakfast.
Yes, I love that
I've
one.
I've seen that firsthand. No, and seriously, I've seen that firsthand.
Absolutely.
Where
Yeah.
I was at one company, we had a relationship with the CRO where the cultures were just not meshing well at all. And then I moved over to a different company, same CRO, the cultures were really, compatible, and everything was great. Like everything worked out much better. There was transparency and communication. So I think that's very important. When selecting your CRO partner, if you want to implement a new technology, just make sure that the culture supports it.
Yeah, and if I could add to that,
couldn't agree more. Please go ahead.
Yeah, I think the challenges are just different in a non-competitive environment like that. From the question, they're not any easier, but you're in bed with a CRO and you can't get out, right? There is no rescue plan. You're in it for the long haul, so you can't just avoid the problems by switching horses, right? And we all know that it's not so easy even to do that. Abandoning one provider for another in the middle of something is hugely expensive and time consuming. So if you're in a sole source relationship, you have to focus more on what value is there in that relationship, less than negotiating some hourly rate or trying to improve a payment schedule or something. It's really more about making sure that you're helping your customers internally solve problems so that relationship continues to be healthy and positive. And that means you sometimes have to act as the bad guy to get them to the table in the right way and get something corrected so that your teams can continue to thrive. And so it's just a different set of challenges, but Hansu's totally right. It's never easier, no matter which way you go.
Yeah.
Great.
Maybe I'm a little jaded here. Sorry, I just wanted to say, like,
we're all jaded.
Sure.
Honestly, if you're in a single CRO relationship, single supplier relationship, personally, I would try and get out of it. I think competition really brings out the best in CROs, and it aligns incentives in a much better way. But maybe that's just my.
Yeah, Zaid, I was actually thinking the same thing. I was thinking, like, really no relationship should be non-competitive. I mean, even when you have a preferred provider agreement and you have pricing agreements and you have, governance strategies. I mean, as a CRO, I'm saying this, like, we want our client, like, we should always be earning our clients' business. It should never be a de facto, just
Totally.
just go to the next study, and and I think just kind of getting out in front of that relationship and saying, look, of course, and I think to Rainey's point, yes, the challenges are very different. You're working towards making it easier to run many studies, but there's a lot of building that goes into that. And I think starting with culture is absolutely the right thing. You should pick your partners from culture, and everything else will follow. You'll find that everything else becomes much easier, when you find a cultural fit. And if not, then it's time maybe to look for a different partner and to not think of it as non-competitive.
Yeah. And if
Great
I
point.
add a word,
Radhika.
oh, sorry, no, I was just going to add a word from my experience on both the CRO and sponsor side. I would 100% agree that it's not a good idea to just have one CRO. I mean, of course, I've been in places where I had to fix a situation of they had a different CRO for every single study, So I think there is a balance based on the portfolio of work you have as to how many preferred providers, and that can be a whole different topic in itself. But I think to Wayne's point, even for the CRO, I mean, even though it's kind of feels nice that you're just a single provider, it actually is good if there is a certain level of healthy competition that they feel like they're earning that trust. And I think even if you have just one or two providers, preferred providers, it doesn't take away from the fact that budgets and other things, there has to be full transparency. I mean, it's still, you will still need technology and other things to have that full transparency, irrespective of how many preferred providers you have.
Great. So we don't have any further questions coming in through the chat. So I'm going to actually pass it to Derek to have the last word here on this question or any other topic that we brought up today.
Well, just kind of in summary, I mean, the thing is that really just building consensus inside when you're going to implement, a new technology, to really have the leader of that process really committed to doing it, because there are going to be bumps in the road, and you have to really be able to stay the course through that whole implementation. And it's a lot easier if you have internal support. If you've built that support amongst all the different stakeholders, amongst the team that you have that's really helping with the implementation. And as I said, when everyone is clear what's in it, what's in it for them. So, again, it's whether it's the vendor, working very closely with the vendor, having a very clear perspective of what that provider is bringing, and then also being clear with the internal team and the recipients of that technology, exactly what it's going to do for them. So.
Well, I think that was an ideal summary. Derek, thank you so much for that. And at this time, I'd love to wrap it up and thank my esteemed panelists for your time in participating in this panel. Hopefully, the audience found it very helpful. As we said, we will be circulating the slides and the recording. Wish you all a very good rest of your day. And thank you also to my colleagues behind the scene who was supporting the magic here today, Karen and Elsie. So thank you all very much. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, Farah. Thanks all.
Thank you.
Thanks, Farah, for the opportunity.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.